How to learn grammar. You are talking to someone and you feel like you're not being understood. You try again and again, but it just doesn't work. The words are there, but the meaning isn't clear. Now think about a time when you were listening to someone and you couldn't understand what they were saying, even though you knew all the words. It's frustrating, right? This happens because of one important thing that we often forget when we are speaking or listening: grammar. Grammar is the backbone of any language. It is the set of rules that helps us put words together to express our thoughts clearly. Without good grammar, our message can get lost, and that makes it difficult to connect with others. But don't worry, learning grammar is not as hard as it seems. It takes time, practice, and patience, and I am here to guide you through it. In this speech, you are going to learn how grammar can transform your speaking and writing skills. I will show you the best tips to make learning grammar easier. You will also discover how listening can play a huge role in learning grammar. By the end, you will be more confident and ready to speak and write in English like never before. Let me tell you something important. You don't need to be perfect in grammar to communicate effectively. What's most important is that you keep trying, keep learning, and never give up. Every mistake you make brings you one step closer to understanding. So, take a deep breath, and let's get started on this exciting journey to mastering grammar. Now, here's a secret tip. Listening carefully is one of the best ways to learn grammar. When you listen to how others speak, you hear the grammar in action. You hear the correct forms of sentences, the structure, the tenses, and the way words connect. The more you listen, the more familiar you become with how grammar works. But how do you stay focused while listening? Here's a secret. Break it down. Instead of trying to understand everything all at once, listen for one thing. Maybe how a sentence starts, or how a verb is used. Focus on small parts, and your brain will start to make connections. The more you listen with intention, the better you will get at using grammar in your own speech. And here's something I want you to remember. Everyone has struggles with grammar. I want to share a story with you. When I first started learning English, I was so scared of making mistakes. I was afraid that people would laugh at me or think I was not smart enough. But then, one day, I made a huge mistake. I said something in front of my teacher, and she looked at me for a moment and then smiled. She didn't laugh, and she didn't criticize me. She simply corrected me gently and said, "It's okay. You're learning, and mistakes are part of that." That moment stuck with me. It made me realize that making mistakes is not something to fear. It's something to embrace. Every mistake is a lesson, and every lesson brings you closer to success. As we go along, you will hear more stories, more tips, and more ideas that will help you improve your grammar. But most importantly, I want you to understand this. You are not alone in this journey. Every person who speaks a language has had to learn its rules. You can do this. Believe in yourself and keep moving forward. Now, let's talk about the first step in learning grammar: listening. This is not just about hearing words, but about understanding how the language works. When you listen to conversations, try to pay attention to how sentences are built. Listen for the subject, the verb, and the object. These are the building blocks of any sentence. You will begin to notice patterns, and over time, you will start to use those patterns in your own speech. One of the best ways to improve your grammar through listening is to listen to stories. Stories are powerful because they use real language in real situations. When you listen to a story, you hear how grammar works in different contexts. For example, when someone tells a story about something that happened in the past, you will hear the past tense. When someone talks about their plans for the future, you will hear the future tense. The more you listen to these patterns, the more natural it will become for you to use them in your own speaking and writing. But listening alone is not enough. You also need to practice speaking and writing. That's where the real magic happens. It's one thing to hear grammar, but it's another thing to use it. As you practice, you will make mistakes, and that's okay. Remember, mistakes are part of the learning process. The more you practice, the more confident you will become. Let me share another story with you. There was a time when I wanted to give up on learning English. I was struggling with grammar, and I just couldn't seem to get it right. But then I met a friend who was also learning English. She wasn't perfect, but she never stopped speaking. She made mistakes, but she kept going. Her confidence inspired me. It made me realize that the key to learning grammar is not being perfect. It's about being brave enough to speak, even when you're not sure. Now, here's another tip. Practice grammar every day. Just a few minutes a day can make a big difference. You don't need to spend hours studying. In fact, short, consistent practice sessions are more effective than long, irregular ones. Try to set aside a few minutes each day to practice grammar. Read a sentence aloud, write a few sentences of your own, or even listen to a short story. Little by little, the pieces of grammar will start to fit together. And while you're practicing, remember this. The road to mastering grammar is not always smooth. There will be days when it feels hard. You might forget a rule, or you might make the same mistake over and over again. But that's okay. Those moments are part of your journey. They don't define you. They are just steps along the way. 1. Of the most beautiful things about learning a language is that it opens up new ways of thinking. When you learn grammar, you learn how to express your thoughts clearly and effectively. You learn how to tell your story in a way that others can understand and connect with. And that's powerful. Grammar is not just about rules. It's about connecting with others, sharing ideas, and expressing yourself. I want to leave you with this thought. Learning grammar is not about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to keep going, no matter how many mistakes you make. Each mistake is a lesson, and each lesson brings you closer to your goal. Keep learning, keep listening, and keep practicing. You are on the right path, and I believe in you. So take a deep breath and keep going. Your journey to mastering grammar has just begun. Learning grammar is like learning to walk. At first, it might feel awkward, but over time, you begin to move more naturally. The key is to start with the basics, and that's what we're going to do now. Let's break down the important rules and tips that will help you build a solid foundation. In grammar, these rules might seem simple, but they are the building blocks of everything you will learn. Sentences and sentence structure. Every sentence you speak or write must have at least two important parts: a subject and a verb. The subject is who or what the sentence is about, and the verb tells us what the subject is doing. For example, she runs is a complete sentence. She is the subject, and runs is the verb. In more complex sentences, you can have objects and additional details, but it all starts with the simple subject-verb combination. So, here's a tip. Whenever you speak or write, make sure you have both a subject and a verb. Without them, the sentence will be incomplete, and it might confuse the person listening. Nouns and pronouns. Nouns are words that name people, places, things, or ideas. For example, dog, house, and happiness are all nouns. Pronouns are words that take the place of nouns, like he, she, it, and they. For instance, instead of saying Maria went to Maria's house, we can say Maria went to her house, where her is the pronoun replacing the noun Maria. Here's a tip. Be careful to use pronouns that match the noun they replace. If you're talking about one person, you use he or she, and if you're talking about more than one person, you use they. So, practice identifying nouns and pronouns in sentences, and make sure they agree. Verbs and tenses. Verbs are the action words in a sentence. They tell us what's happening. In English, we use different verb forms to show when an action happens. This is called tense. The three main tenses are present tense. This shows actions happening now or regularly. For example, I eat breakfast every day. Past tense. This shows actions that have already happened. For example, I ate breakfast yesterday. Future tense. This shows actions that will happen. For example, I will eat breakfast tomorrow. Tip. One of the most important things to remember is to stay consistent with your tenses. If you start telling a story in the past, don't suddenly switch to the present or future unless there's a reason to. This helps your listener follow the timeline of events. 4. Articles. A and the. Articles are small words that we use before nouns to give more information about them. There are two types of articles. Indefinite articles. A and an are used when you're talking about something in general. For example, I saw a dog means any dog, not a specific one. You use a before words that begin with a consonant sound, e.g., a cat, and an before words that begin with a vowel sound, e.g., an apple. Definite article, the, is used when you are talking about something specific. For example, I saw the dog in the yard means a specific dog, not just any dog. A helpful tip: use a or an when talking about something for the first time, and use the when you talk about it again or when it's clear which one you mean. Adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. They give more details about people, places, things, or ideas. For example, the tall man uses the adjective tall to describe the man. Adverbs, on the other hand, describe verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. They usually tell us how, when, where, or to what degree something happens. For example, she runs quickly uses the adverb quickly to describe how she runs. Here's a tip: be mindful of where you place adjectives and adverbs in sentences. Adjectives usually go before the noun they describe, e.g., a beautiful flower, while adverbs often go after the verb they modify, e.g., she sings beautifully. Prepositions. Prepositions are words that show the relationship between a noun or pronoun and another word in the sentence. They tell us where, when, or how something is happening. For example, in the sentence, "The book is on the table," on is the preposition showing where the book is. A helpful tip is to memorize common prepositions like in, on, under, beside, between, and around. They will help you express relationships between things more clearly. Conjunctions. Conjunctions are words that connect words, phrases, or sentences. Some common conjunctions are and, but, or, and because. For example, in the sentence, "I want to go to the park, but it's raining." But is the conjunction connecting the two parts of the sentence. Tip: when you use conjunctions, make sure the parts of the sentence you are connecting are related. For instance, use and to connect similar ideas, e.g., I like tea and coffee, and use but to connect contrasting ideas, e.g., I like tea but don't like coffee. Subject-verb agreement. Subject-verb agreement means that the subject and the verb in a sentence must match in number. If the subject is singular, the verb should be singular. If the subject is plural, the verb should be plural. For example, she plays soccer. Singular subject, she, singular. Verb plays, they play soccer. Plural subject, they, plural verb, play. Here's a tip. If you're unsure whether the subject is singular or plural, try to break the sentence down. Look for the main subject and the main verb, and make sure they agree in number. Punctuation. Punctuation marks are essential because they help us understand the meaning of sentences. They tell us when to pause, when to stop, and when to ask a question. Some common punctuation marks include period. Used to end a statement. For example, I like to read, comma. Used to separate items in a list or to show a pause. For example, I bought apples, bananas, and oranges, question mark. Used at the end of a question. For example, do you like coffee? Exclamation mark. Used to show strong feelings. For example, wow, that's amazing. Tip: make sure you use punctuation to help your listener understand the meaning of your sentences. Without punctuation, sentences can become confusing. 10. Capitalization. In English, we use capital letters at the beginning of sentences and for proper nouns, names of people, places, or things. For example, my name is Maria, and I live in New York. A helpful tip: always check that your sentences start with a capital letter and that proper nouns are capitalized. It's a small rule, but it makes a big difference in how professional your writing looks. As we continue on this journey of learning grammar, remember that these basic rules are just the beginning. The more you practice, the more natural these rules will become. Over time, you will begin to use grammar automatically, without thinking about it, and as you become more confident, you will feel proud of your progress. But the most important thing to remember is this: learning grammar is a process, and it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone does. Even the most fluent speakers make mistakes, sometimes. What matters is that you keep trying. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep practicing. The road might be long, but with every step, you are getting closer to your goal. I believe in you. You have the power to master grammar and become a confident speaker and writer. Stay focused, stay positive, and most importantly, keep going.